In this epic adventure, I, Rowen, a werewolf, engage in a life or death struggle with the evil scientist Cormac Quinn. In a decisive battle, I risk my life to protect my family and beloved Fiona. Our story is filled with dramatic twists and intense conflict, with the most captivating part being when we face seemingly insurmountable obstacles, only to unexpectedly discover hidden strengths and courage. Chapter "丨The, a true Queen Rowen right on time." "Mutt, I've been awaiting this little reunion," Cormac said, laughing like mad. I growled, salivating, and ready to sink my fangs into his neck. I threw myself against Cormac, shoving him away from Fiona and Rowen. The scientist reared his head back, chuckling, and plunged his poisonous, bladed gloves down my hide. But to my delight and his surprise, Fiona's potion worked. He yanked his hand back and made a hissing sound. Cormac stared down at the razor, like glove, frowning and back at me. Puzzled, he glanced back down and rubbed his arm. I used that moment of his confusion to attack him. My teeth wrapped around his leg and I sank my fangs into the flesh, relishing the taste of metallic blood filling my mouth. The evil scientist held out and tried to shove a vial of bright purple liquid at me wolfsbane. I let go of his leg, pulled back my wolf's head, and charged straight into his stomach. The force propelled him, hurling across the small space, and Cormac landed with a thud in the cell's corner, his forehead hitting the concrete wall. After grabbing his head and moaning, Cormac jumped to his feet. I saw the hatred in his eyes and knew he would try tackling me. A laugh bubbled in my chest, watching his nostrils flare. It wouldn't be a fair fight, but that was fine with me. I took a moment to glance at Fiona huddled over Rowen. "Les, concentrate on Rowen and don't worry about me. Do what you can for him. You take care of my bastard father, and I'll tend to your brother. Just be careful. Rowen, he's a crafty motherfucker," she said through our bond. I fought back a chuckle, not used to Fiona cursing. Perhaps Fiona had rubbed off on her a bit. Cormac circled, dancing on his feet in the small cage like a boxer, seething as he studied me. Then a burst of light lit up the room and we both turned to Fiona, with her palms splayed on Rowen's chest. Sparks of light sprung from her hands, enveloping my brother, and I witnessed the color returning to Rowen's face. Joy filled my heart, but it didn't last long. The ground shook and flung Fiona and Rowen across the cell, landing at my paws. A large crack in the concrete floor appeared, separating us from Cormac Quinn. He glanced around in a frenzy, looking as bewildered as I felt. Black metal bars fell from above, enclosing Cormac in the already small cage. I shifted back and helped Fiona and Rowen to their feet. "What kind of sorcery is this?" Cormac growled, grabbing and shaking the bars of his confinement. "Let me out of here now. Fiona, if you don't, I promise I'll kill that mangy wolf you've chosen over me. Your own flesh and blood." Fiona stalked to the metal prison, glaring at her father. "I have no idea how to let you out of this tiny prison." She shrugged. "Don't play coy with me, little girl." He narrowed his eyes. "You put me here and you can let me out." Fiona laughed, a musical, tinkling sound pleasing to my ears, as much as I'd like to take the credit. "It's such a savage crake seeing you like this." She turned, looking back at me and Rowen, who was still weak and leaning against my shoulder. "What do you lads think?" Fiona grinned. "It's grand as feck seeing this EJ to get his karma. How does it feel?" "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Now you're the one locked up after we saved those hostages you were so determined to catch." I winked at him as an idea crossed my mind. If Fiona hadn't cast the spell capturing Cormac, who had? Perhaps Fiona Ortiona. Regardless, I needed him to believe Fiona was responsible and use his release to get Kyra back. We still hadn't found my sister. "Fiona, allow Cormac to think you are responsible and have the power to release him. We can use it as a bargaining chip to find out where Kyra is." "Wonderful idea," she responded through our bond. Fiona strode toward the iron cell, grasping the bars. "Tell me where Kyra is and I will let you out." "Never," he spat. Fiona turned her back on Cormac. "Let's get out of here. He'll change his mind. If that's what you think. You don't know me very well." Cormac crossed his arms. She whirled around, facing him. "You're right. I don't know you at all. My whole life has been a lie. You are nothing but a kidnapping, murdering, evil bastard. I have no problem leaving you here to rot. You wouldn't dare leave me too." A piercing scream drowned his words out. "How dare you defy your mother and Queen?" Queen Celestria's voice resonated throughout the space, as if it were amplified by powerful speakers. "Shite. We have trouble. Come on and follow me. Don't you dare leave me here." "Fiona," Cormac yelled at our retreating forms, "I command you to listen to me. Your mother and Queen. IRAQIL. You will not abandon me for these savage beasts and mortals." We followed the sound of Celestria's voice until we found the Queen facing off with Cat in a circle of harsh, blinding light. "Those beasts and mortals are my friends and family," Cat cried, her voice cracking. She lifted her chin, glaring at her mother with golden tears pouring from her eyes. "You abandoned me by giving me to Cormac Quinn. What kind of mother does that? He cut off my wings and performed heinous experiments on me. He tortured me." Cat balled her hands into fists at her sides. "Just stop and listen to me. IRAQIL. I can explain." Cat shook her head from side to side. "Nothing you can say will change my mind. I have Cormac Quinn imprisoned as we speak. He will pay for allowing you to leave his house." Celestria shrieked. "We pledged an oath. I'd aid him with his sex flex experiments and, once completed, he was to give you back to me. You'll return to where you belong in the Fire Realm. I forbid you to remain in a mortal realm." Cat stepped closer to the Queen, her head held high. "I would die first. If you want me to return to your realm, you'll have to kill me first." The Queen appeared distressed. Her brow wrinkled, and it looked like she had tears in her eyes as well. For a moment, I thought she would relent, but I should have known the bitter, evil Queen better. "If you so desire," Celestria whispered, her words echoing on repeat. Once those chilling words faded, I heard the cry of Lucas, Fiona, Tiana, and Fiona, all screaming, "No!" Fiona sprinted toward Cat and the Queen, busting through the enclosure of light. Her body swelled with a peculiar glimmer. Fiona's body seemed to ignite, engulfed in flames that radiated scorching heat. Our mated bond intensified the sensation, causing me to feel the blistering inferno emanating from her skin. As she moved further into the circle, I watched her change. Even without wings, her body altered into the celestial form of a fire fairy princess. The sight was awe-inspiring and sucked the breath from my lungs. She jumped in front of Cat as Queen Celestria lifted her arms, whispering what sounded like jumbled words. Fiona spun around and created a bouncing circle of orange light to shield her cousin and best friend as flames of fire danced Celestria. However, as the hot wind brushed against my skin, I feared that the flickering protective circle wasn't enough to save them. The resounding sound of Celestria's words in the distance only heightened my apprehension, while the smell of smoke and fear mingled in the air. In that moment, I realized with a heavy heart that they would both perish at the merciless hands of the malevolent Queen. I watched my Luna's exquisite face, weighed down with fear and bravery, as Celestria's wrath crashed in a halo of blinding light around Fiona and Cat. I lunged toward the light and an ethereal figure appeared, dragging Celestria's hand aside and deciding the beam away from Fiona and Cat. A bolt of electric silvery light crashed into the surface of the beam, causing it to shatter into tiny fragments, protecting the wingless fairies. "Fiona," I roared in my head. Lucas and I shifted and bolted toward the blinding glare. Cat's body plummeted toward the earth, a scene of chaos unfolding. In a swift motion, Lucas morphed back and enveloped her fragile frame, his arms offering solace amidst the turmoil. He checked for signs of life and pressed Cat against his chest. I rushed toward Fiona, shielding her with my body as shards of light exploded in all directions. The dazzling fragments danced and shimmered, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that filled the air. Like a symphony of tinkling chimes, the sound of their splintering reverberated through the space. A whiff of fire hung in the atmosphere, electrifying the moment. I could feel the warmth of Fiona's body against mine, a comforting presence in the turmoil. All around us, screams and footfalls sounded as my head raced to see who had intruded on the Queen's wrath. Fiona and I gaped at the enchanting fairy, her dark obsidian hair cascading like a midnight waterfall. As she stood in front of the Queen, her piercing golden eyes held an otherworldly allure. Her face, a breathtaking masterpiece, exuded an ethereal beauty. She turned, her gaze fixated on Fiona. At that moment, the emotion in her expression spoke volumes, conveying a profound understanding that resonated between us. To my agent extraordinaire, webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm. Fiona cried, fat tears dripping down her face. Run, she yelled. I love you, Fiona, Princess of Fire, and proper heir to the Fire Throne. The majestic fairy turned to the Queen, narrowing her eyes. Celestria, you killed our brother and made a vow with Cormac Quinn, helping him kidnap me to take my place as the Queen of Fire. You gave away your own daughter for a throne. You are despicable and a fraud. Merlin A's hands ignited in red light as she flew toward the impostor Queen. She threw out her hands and a glittering purple cyclone engulfed Celestria, as a piercing scream wafted through the air. Fiona yelled, "We have to get out of here." She grabbed Cat's face and inserted something between her trembling lips. A thick, pink liquid stained the princess's mouth. Fiona stared at her in desperation. "Find your powers. Cat, you must help Tiana get us out of here." Cat nodded and grabbed Fiona's hand. They locked eyes, and Cat stood up, surprising everyone. Her body transformed, glowing bronze as her eyes turned to saffron copper. Tiana then produced shadows all around us while Cat lifted her hands and spun around, making me dizzy. I watched as Cat connected Tiana's shadows, covering the entire compound. It created a safety net, surrounding all the creatures of Primordia. Fiona turned her mother before the twilight engulfed us, and I sensed her anguish and worry. As the women exchanged a bittersweet smile, I glanced at my brother, feeling Rian's fear and hearing the name Kyra flashing through his mind like a gutted cry. Seconds later, everything collapsed, fading away and ejecting us all from this place. We plunged into the black abyss before landing on the cold, snowy earth, and I glanced around, looking for the others. I noticed Tiana was missing among all the bodies scattered on the frozen ground and realized she must be back in her quaint, hidden cottage. The creatures of Primordial all sat stunned with a look of panic as Fiona clung to me, trembling. I held her and peeked at my brother, whose expression mirrored my concern. Cat then collapsed, and Lucas enveloped her as the shadows vanished. Fiona ascended above all the fallen. Her hands, erected with magical energy, cast above her head and launched a beam of light, consuming us all. She crashed to the ground, drained, and her sister witches rushed to her aid, while all around us the world filled with a whisper chanting sound. Fiona, her body weakened to the brink, summoned her last reserves of energy to present her final gift before she exhausted her last ounce of strength. What did she do? Rian crawled toward Fiona and me. That damn witch. She ruined our only hope of getting Kyra back, and now look at her. He sat next to us, covering his exposed private area and pointing toward Fiona, lying unconscious on the cold, hard ground. Stupid lass. She better not die on me. Not before I tell her what I think about her ridiculous fire and I spells she used during the battle. To my agent extraordinaire, webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Shut up, Fiona barked, startling me, and I watched Rian's eyes widen. To my agent extraordinaire, webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Rowen. Fiona saved Fiona's life and risked her own trying to rescue Kyra. You unappreciates bastard. I shook my head, disgusted with his attitude. Fiona handed us some clothes, which I kept in a backpack that she managed to not lose. Thanks, we answered, staring at the ground, properly ashamed. I dressed, looked around, and noticed with relief the enemy had not followed us. We were safe from Cormac Quinn, Celestria, the fairy goblins, and hunters, though we found ourselves injured and traumatized. Hundreds of miles from home, and without Kyra, I took Fiona in my arms and cradled her to ward off the cold. I love you, Looney O'Connell, Princess of Fire, and for now, we are safe. Chapter 33, Casualties of War. Rowen and Fiona. Rowen. I noticed Fiona stand up and shove Fiona into the SUV and then sprint toward Rowen, who was again struggling with Cormac. As I rushed to stop her, Cormac heaved a silver powder at me, but I moved just before it made contact. However, the wind wasn't playing nice, and the powder blew into my face, causing my eyes and skin to burn. I'll seize a bunch of your pack mutts today and return the favor you did me back in my lab. Cormac let out a crazed cackle. A snarl left my lips as I lurched forward, my razor lightly thripping at his leg. The taste of blood invaded my mouth as he cried out in agony. As we grappled, Cormac drove a silver blade into my back, and I hissed from the pain but rolled away before he could do more damage. His bloody weapon fell to the snowy ground, and I hurtled myself at him. Cormac sailed through the air before landing a few feet away. Rion's frantic voice sounded inside my mind. We've got to get Fiona and Fiona out of here. Then a group of vehicles appeared. More hunters. We'll never make it out alive. Rowen. I swallowed hard, waiting for him to respond. Rion's voice resounded in my head. The sex flex goblins must have delayed them, bro. Those monsters will attack anything they see. But I have bigger issues right now. I watched as 4 of Cormac's hunters charged Cordrian's wolf, and one of them landed a shot. To my agent extraordinaire, webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Naughty words booming from my mouth sounded devastating, even to my ears. It left me shattered, seeing my brother drop to the ground unconscious. But I rushed to him, wounded or not. Then I heard Fiona and Fiona let out a scream behind me. As I turned around, I saw one of the hunters holding my baby sister. To my agent extraordinaire, webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My mind whirled as I glanced between my brother and sister. At that moment, I didn't know what to do. Then another hunter threw Fiona down, tackling her on the cold ground. To my agent extraordinaire, webnovel, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I held in my mind. Go help Rowen. She called to me. The sound of her voice caused my throat to constrict, and I blinked back tears. But I couldn't leave 3 females to the mercy of Quinn and his hunting pack. Before I could decide, Fiona let out another piercing scream, crushing the rest of my control. Then the deafening sound of an explosion rocked beneath my feet and smoke engulfed me. As the air cleared, I noticed Fiona throwing out her fist with balls of bright red and orange fire. Most of the hunters scattered, and I breathed a sigh of relief when Fiona jumped to her feet. Fiona had saved Fiona's life by sending the hunter running for safety. Get in the car where I helped Rowen and Kyra, I told Fiona through our bond. I watched her turn to Fiona and yell something at the witch, but it seemed Fiona still had work to do. She scrambled toward Rowen's slumped form, throwing balls of fire and ice. Fiona raised her arms, screaming a chant of jumbled words. The wind picked up, knocking me over, and my eyes widened witnessing a tornado taking out the goblins rushing toward us. The tiny witch was fierce. When I whipped my head around, I stared in horror as 2 hunters drug Rowen away, throwing him inside a black van. To my agent extraordinaire, Myron Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Wake up, wake up. My words fell on deaf ears. Fiona continued to wreak havoc. I searched through the smoke and debris, my eyes blurry and burning from the silver dust, to find Cormac holding Kyra in front of him like a human shield. My vision turned crimson as rage washed over me. Where's Kat? Cormac's expression now appeared stony. She's not here. Quinn. That's too bad. He stroked Kyra's hair, grinning. Looks like you won't be reunited with your sister after all. I can't do anything. Rowen. To do so would put Kyra in danger. Fiona yelled. We wouldn't want that. Now would we? Cormac passed Kyra to a large man behind him. I stood helpless, hearing her cries as she kicked and squirmed in the man's tight grip. Filled with indignation, I lunged at Quinn, knowing he deserved something worse than death. While we fought, I monitored Fiona, who had followed Fiona to the SUV. All around me, I recognized the chaotic roar and the frenzied cry of the fallen. You could smell it in the air, the essence of burning flesh and the blood covering the frozen, snowy ground. Death clouded my vision as I slunk Cormac Quinn left and right before dropping him and rolling to avoid bullets coming from the few remaining hunters. My warrior's heart growled out for my siblings and wounded or dead pack members. Then the sound of guns and roses singing, civil war, wafted in the air, and I saw the SUV barreling toward me, running over all in its path. The vibration of the vehicle and music silenced the shouts of the surrounding battle, and the remaining goblins and hunters fled. I rolled away just in time, but Cormac wasn't as lucky. He staggered to his feet, trying to dodge the SUV, but Fiona sped up, striking Cormac and sending him flying before he landed with a thud in the bloodied snow. I shifted back into without clothes human form and jumped in, pushing Fiona over to the passenger seat. Oh my God, did I kill him? Fiona looked at me with fear, filled widened eyes. He's not dead, I said through ragged breaths, wiping blood from my face and eyes. But my father, are you sure I'm sure? Fiona, he's not dead, I replied, harsher than I wanted, as I left her lips, and I glanced around at the carnage of ravaged bodies and corpses of wolves, humans, and creatures that had perished in the battle. There were not as many dead wolves as humans and fairy goblins. What happened to the rest of your pack? Fiona asked, her voice sounding tired and hoarse. I told them to retreat. I gripped the steering wheel, concentrating on the road, and noticed the black vehicles following us. Hang on, girls. We have company. My foot slammed on the gas. Buckle up. Just before a bend in the road, I hit the brake pedal while jerking the wheel to the right. The SUV careened in the middle of the road and I headed off into the snowy forest and turned off the headlight. After driving miles into the woods, I pulled into an opening between two massive oak trees. The hunters were no longer on my tail, but I glanced in the rearview mirror just in case. Where are we? Rowen. Fiona touched my arm, and I flinched. My nerves felt tight as a rope. At the entrance to a hidden tunnel, I turned, giving her one smile. Hidden tunnels are cool, Fiona whispered, staring out the window. We have security systems in place around Dublin so we can't thwart the hunters if necessary. The idea of having to resort to such a measure had my voice twitching with anger. Who's? Fiona asked. Not just us. All the creatures of Primordial, I explained. Finally, I pulled into a deserted park. Fuck. Fuck. Letting out my rage. Sorry, lasses. My pain is hers. My anger is hers. I reminded myself. I sensed it welling up inside me, and I took a calming breath. Fiona, can you grab me some clothes from the back? Lass. Sure thing. She chuckled. It must feel very freeing to drive in the buff. Fiona giggled, igniting us all. Perhaps all the tension, grief, and overwrought emotions caused us to become hysterical as the SUV filled with raucous laughter. I dressed and hopped back into the vehicle. How's your arm? I glanced at Fiona, taking in her face, bathed in blood and her rumpled hair. Fiona glanced down at the bullet wound. She raised her head, and tears spilled down her dirty cheeks. "Don't cry, lass," I whispered, stroking her hair, causing Fiona to cry anew. "Too many have died," she choked out. "I know, love, I know." Hearing sniffles from behind, I peeked in the rearview mirror at Fiona, swiping at her eyes. "And they took Rhiannon and Kyra," Fiona exclaimed between distressing, agony-filled sobs. "We will find them. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, hearts out thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Desperation lacing my tone, but God only knows what he will do. And by now there could be no, Fiona said, shaking her head. "My father won't harm them. He needs them to get Cat back. You saw Queen Celestria's fury at us. Imagine how she feels about Cormac. She left Cat in his care. He was supposed to care for her." She gaped at me with rounded, wet eyes. "I've been living with kidnappers and killers. Take it easy. Love. Breath." I grabbed her hand, placing a gentle kiss on her knuckles. "I can't try to find them," Fiona announced. "Let's go to my apartment. It's above the bookstore. You can." Looking at her over my shoulder. "Remember what Fiona told you. There's not another witch who can find or hide people or things like me." She winked. I wasted no time driving to the bookstore in the hippie district. "Let's go in the back way just to be safe." Fiona led us through a small door and up some narrow stairs to an apartment that made up the entire second floor. The place was nicer than I imagined, given the threadbare appearance of the crowded bookstore. Fiona guided us into a sunny kitchen filled with plants. She ordered us to sit down before brewing tea. "Drink this," placing a mug in front of Fiona. "Is this some kind of magical tea?" I asked with a frown. Fiona glared at me. "Yes, it's a hypnotizing tea." She rolled her eyes and sat a cup before me. Fiona blew on the hot brew and took a sip. "That's it. Drink it all down." Fiona patted Fiona's back before grabbing things from the fridge and making breakfast. "We don't have time for this." I let out a frustrated growl. "We have to find Rhiannon and Kyra." I stood, but Fiona pointed at me and my ass hit the chair. I hated when she did that shite. "We have to arm ourselves. Alpha Wolf. And I have to prepare. Eat and gain back your strength." "I don't get it. At first you refused to help us with Cormac, so why are you so keen to help us now?" The acidity in my voice rang clear. Fiona smiled, shrugging. "It's not up to just one race to destroy Cormac's hideout and liberate those prisoners." She snapped. "But this plan is risky, and I feel responsible." She lowered her head. "I tried to rescue Kyra and now Rhiannon and your sister are both captured. You were brave." Fiona stood and grabbed her hand. "And I appreciate your efforts. They could have killed you." "Fiona, you also saved Fiona's life and I'm in your debt. But I can't risk any more of my pack members." I raked a hand over my face. "We've lost too many, and the survivors are trying to heal the wounded and protect the helpless." "I know, but we don't need many wolves for this." Fiona winked. She pointed to our plates. "Eaten already myself. We'll leave in a couple of hours." "Fiona." After a short time, we finished our meal and tended to our injuries. We needed the food and rest, but neither of us wanted to talk about the elephant in the room. Yet since Rowen gave in and accepted me as his mate, it was difficult to hide our mutual thoughts. This was all my fault, thanks to my father, and I realized the council only accepted our moon, blessed union, because Rowen was their alpha. Now they had even more reasons to oppose and hate me. Lunia Connor or not. Rowen hesitated, but after a moment, he stood and placed a hand under my chin, causing me to lift my face. His lips crashed into mine. His kiss tasted of tea, blood, and suffering. "When this is behind us, we'll talk about it." Rowen cupped my cheek. I nodded. breathless and unable to look away from those captivating stormy eyes I'd been obsessed with since we met. Fiona strode into the kitchen. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'm disturbing something. She stood dressed in all black, looking ready for battle, with military boots, black cargo pants, a metallic t-shirt, and a black leather jacket. Fiona grinned, reminding me of a rebellious teenager. But, as I studied her eyes, I saw wisdom beyond her years. She placed a bag loaded with stuff on the table and held out items for each of us. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Fiona handed Rowen a small jar, and he looked at it with skepticism. What the feck is this? Must you always doubt me? She sighed and shook her head. You are reminding me of that wolf pup, Rianne. Her tone was sarcastic, but I watched her face fall. We will get him back. With a smile, I reached out and squeezed her hand. I know, but Rianne isn't here for me to taunt, she announced without a drop of smugness. She just appeared somber. She pointed to the jar in Rowen's hand. That is a special oil to repel silver and other poisons, such as wolfsbane, so slather it all over yourself. Fiona then gave me a small vial of cloudy liquid. You're allergic to metal, she added, with a decisive nod. I you inched my brows together. I am. Yes, because of your fairy blood. Metal affects the fire by weakening their powers. That's why most fairies don't leave their realm. Do I put it on my skin? Taking the vial. No, drink it to enhance your abilities. It will suppress the effects of the metal and boost your powers. But I don't know how to use my powers. But you still possess them. She smiled. I heard a pecking sound and turned to see the black raven standing on the kitchen windowsill. He let out a loud call, and Fiona strode to the window and opened it. Hello, Malay. She grabbed a piece of bread from the table and held it out to the bird. That's my good boy. Now do as I asked. We leave soon. The raven cocked his head, chirped, and flew off. I'll be right back. Fiona dashed from the room. She's even pushy and overbearing with birds, whispered Rowen while rubbing the liquid all over his skin. I popped a hand over my mouth to stifle the giggle and grinned at him. She reminds me of this guy I know. Rowen rolled his eyes and threw me a smile. Very funny. Last, I uncapped the vial and drank the liquid, which tasted like bitter perfume. Once gone, I heard Fiona's footsteps heading back into the kitchen. But judging by the sound, she wasn't alone. When the redhead appeared back in the kitchen, 3 people were smiling at us. A tall, handsome guy with a brilliant smile, a girl with caramel skin and short, dark hair that showed off her heart-shaped face. Then caught him Oage from behind saying, Todd Ducker, running over and throwing my arms around her. Lucas. Rowen rushed over to hug his beta. Tutiana hugged me next. What are you guys doing here? Shocked to see them. Fiona told us what happened through the raven. Kat explained. We came to help. Behind her smile, I noticed Kat's look of anguish. My mother. I'm so sorry for what she did. And it's all my fault. Don't be sorry, Rowen said. It's not your fault. Katchi nodded at him with a watery smile. But I knew she blamed herself. I mentioned that we'd have a little help, Fiona declared. But can we fight off a horde of hunters? I glanced at Fiona. Don't underestimate the power we have working together. Fiona winked at me. Deanna grinned at her and followed the redhead toward the door. All right. It's time to go. Go where? I glanced at Fiona. I know where Cormac is keeping Kyra, Rianne, and a bunch of others. That's amazing. Is it close by? We must go now. Where and how long will it take? Rowen's excitement warmed my heart, and I chuckled. We'll be there soon. Trust me, but this time we won't be using any vehicles, Fiona assured, laughing too. Chapter 30 Fursa followed the shadows Fiona and Prue and Fiona Fiona moved to Fiona front door leading to the stairs. She recited a few words, and her body changed, taking on the radiant gleam I noticed when I first met her. Her hands shone golden, and sparklers like swirling cymbals covered her body. Her eyes, the color of moonbeams, stared above our heads. A mysterious snake, like shadows, climbed the walls and covered the door. She reached out a hand, immersing it in the thick blackness, and opened the door. The stairs were now gone and a bleak emptiness filled the space, welcoming us in silence. "Follow me." Fiona seemed to be in a trance, judging by the faraway look in her silver eyes. Lucas turned to us with a profound expression. "Remain calm. And remember, the passage can be a bit rough." He threw us a tight smile before taking a hesitant step, and the shadows engulfed him. Fiona and Kat followed him. I swallowed hard, glancing at Rowen, and he clasped my hand. "It seems we are next." My voice sounded odd and far away. "Yes, so it appears. Luna." He raised my hand, kissing my knuckles, and together we lumbered like stumbling fools into the abyss. My sense of identity vanished, as if I had evaporated into a void and ceased to exist. I couldn't hear or see anything, and panic seized me as I reached out, trying to find Rowen's hand, which was no longer there. Not being able to sense anything was frustrating and maddening. I wanted to scream, but realized I wouldn't hear myself in this strange emptiness. Without warning, I felt a tug akin to a vacuum sucking me into a spiral and landed on soft grass in an open field. I groaned in despair, finding the surrounding sounds, peaceful as they were, overwhelming. I noticed the color of the sky like a clear dawn morning, heard footsteps approaching, and then Rowen's arms raised me to my feet as my legs quivered. Only Fiona emerged from the darkness, looking composed. She studied us, a shamed expression on her face, and fixed her eyes on a spot off in the distance. I followed her gaze and found an old building surrounded by open fields with rolling hills and green grass. "No," I whispered with a knot in my chest, contemplating the place I had always considered my haven. The University of Oxford held a special place in my heart. Cats too. My father is keeping people hostage at the university. "This is our school, Cat." I turned and saw Cat's mouth hanging open in shock as well. Rowen stared at the ancient edifice, hands on his hips. "How can we get inside?" "The lab is underground in a shelter, like a bunker used during wars," Fiona answered, kneeling on the grass. She grimaced, shaking her head. "But the defenses are strong. Just looking at this fortress, I don't see how we could get in, especially since Cormac has it guarded with heavy manpower. Or get us in." Fiona glared at the building, her voice sounding severe and confident. She raised her arms and whispered a chant as the surrounding shadows vibrated and came to life. They reached out and touched each other like hands, forming a series of channels. "Follow within the shadows and remain inside them at all times." Fiona tipped, toed into the tree shadow, and poof, she was gone. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience and enthusiasm. "Not again," Rowen grumbled, but he did as the Princess of Shadows instructed. I copied her movements and jumped into the shadows, but it didn't feel as overwhelming this time. Outside, the world thrived with vibrant colors and sounds, while here, silence prevailed. I started walking, following the group, and noticed something strange. Why, into Fiona's shadows, I could pass through walls and objects like they weren't even there. As we entered the enclosure, I spotted people moving through the corridors. Guards and professors were working, but despite us wandering among them, they remained oblivious to our existence. I stayed mute for fear of being overheard, remaining careful not to leave the shadows, as Fiona had directed us to do. We descended the structure. Fiona continued joining the diminished shadows in the corridors, keeping us proceeding as we traveled further down. After a long journey through hallways and many stairs, We reached a vast room matching the one from Cormac's memories. However, it appeared more advanced in technology. The whole place looked like a penitentiary, with cells and prisoners everywhere. Some captives gaped around in terror, sporting fresh wounds, and I realized they hadn't been here long, but it was obvious that others had been here for an extended period. Their glum expressions and skeletal bodies revealed the cruelty that someone my father had subjected them to. I grabbed Rowen's hand and buried my face in his chest, experiencing a pang of grief from witnessing Cormac's cruelty. Can we rescue them all? I reared my head back, peering up at him. Fiona answered, Listen, I refuse to leave behind a single soul in this God-forsaken hellhole. Icy bitterness seemed to drip from her words. She reached into a pocket and pulled out a tiny corked bottle. Fiona grinned and popped the top open. After ingesting it, her eyes held a peculiar glint. Let the games begin. Fiona jumped out of the shadows created by Fiona, and I watched a circle of dazzling light appear. She marched to the center and held her palms up, drawing in deep breaths. Soon, her face writhed into a grimace and she released a deep moan. And then I heard something break. Madness ensued as everything cracked bulbs, and even the silent alarms. Fiona then closed her fists, which flared with a remarkable energy sizzling from her fingers. With a frenzied cry, she opened her hands, creating a ripple that swept through the surrounding space. The cell doors buckled and shook, and the lab entrances twisted until the opening devices snapped. What the hell have you done? Fiona jumped from the shadows and gathered the witch in her arms right as Fiona's legs gave way. Just buying us time. Fiona lifted her head and smirked before it dropped back on Fiona's shoulder. Can you create an escape from this fucking hellhole? Fiona nodded. Yes, excellent. Fiona removed another vial from her cargo pants and gulped it down. It seemed to have an immediate effect. She stood on her own and grinned. Cover this place in your protective shadows so we can free these hostages as soon as possible. Cormac Quinn is one evil, sick bastard. I'm on it. Fiona jumped back into the shadows while Rowen I took off running. Open the cages, Rowen yelled to Fiona. Cat and Lucas. Then dispatch all the wolves to me. Send all the witches my way. Fiona winked at Rowen. We all split up and began smashing the locks on the cages, freeing the captives from the cells. They all appeared dazed, and some were too weak or afraid to fight. Take the sick or wounded to Fiona, Rowen yelled. I agreed and continued demolishing the locks on the cells by hitting and kicking them. As soon as I freed each one, I showed them where to run. Go to the shadows. My heart pounded like drums in my ears and sweat beaded along my brow as I tried to calm my erratic breathing. After kicking down so many prison doors, my body ached and throbbed. However, the sheer number of captives made it impossible for me to spot any familiar faces among them. Then I came to a cage where an elderly man was lying cold, huddling in a corner. His grey hair looked unkempt, and he appeared feeble. Are you awake? I'm here to rescue you. Can you stand up? I rushed into the cell and grabbed the old man by the arms to help him stand. Oh yeah, I can stand, the man said, and turned around. Out of nowhere, he attacked me, gripping my neck with gloved hands that had sharp hands. I felt warm blood running down my skin and a strangling sensation in my throat. His laugh, crazed and high-pitched, intensified as he peered at me with wicked, looking eyes. Mr. Quinn will be so thrilled, said James, my father's driver, as he straddled me and raised his hand, ready to deliver the final blow. Rowen Fiona's pain was an obvious warning that something dreadful was happening to her. The instant I felt the tightness clouding my senses and choking me, I knew I must go to her. Fiona. Knowing if I didn't reach her soon, she could die. I ran like crazy, not giving a damn about anything, while all hell broke loose around me. The free creatures of Primordial fled or struggled to release those still trapped by the wicked scientist, Cormac Quinn, and his associates. Their screams were like sirens blaring. The noise filled my body with rage as they battled for their lives, including Fiona. The idea of her fighting for her life caused me to feel and swept into my eyes. My body leapt across the distance and, as I ran, I perceived her screams. A whisper erupted from her mind, but I couldn't decipher it. Something flashed, and a vision of Fiona trapped in a cage with a man on top of her blazed before my eyes. After rounding the corner, I witnessed the scene and dashed down the corridor, ready to rip the bastard's head from his shoulders. A howl escaped from my wolf, and as I neared, an explosion of vivid, shimmering light surged from Fiona's body and sent him sailing through the cell. The impact was so strong that I had to cover my face and turn away. It sent me soaring, and I crashed onto the concrete floor. After shaking my head to recover my senses, I glanced around and saw Fiona standing with an intense light emanating from her body. Her hair grew to the floor before my eyes and turned a midnight blue color as the sparkling light traveled to her fingertips. Well, turns out those whispers of scandal and gossip were true, James said as he rose. Spitting out blood, he gaped at Fiona with revulsion. All those years toiling for your father by driving Mr. Quinn everywhere and hunting your kind beside him. He glanced between me and Rowen. His lips gnarled. Unshocked Cormac would even consider fucking a fairy and having a leper as his offspring. Fiona glowered at him. Believe it, James. And this leper is going to kick your ass. She strode toward James, grinning with a gleam in her now glowing amber, red eyes. The wounds on her neck inflicted by James had vanished, while the light was still shining throughout Fiona's body. Flames of fire surrounded her. It looked as if she stood inside a fiery bubble, and I watched, mesmerized. Fiona had found her magical powers, and I looked on, holding my head high and proud. As she towered above James, a kaleidoscope of light flared from her fingers, and a rush of electric energy shot toward the old man. I rushed to Fiona's aid, recognizing the strength of her magical power. It thrust her backward, making her stumble. My arms reached Fiona, breaking her fall just in time as, all around us, everything exploded. While carrying her, I noticed how hot her skin felt, and her eyes appeared tainted. The crimson red had turned a blazing golden hue. Nurse, are you hurt? My lips tugged into a worried frown. She shook her head and squirmed, wanting down, with her feet on the floor. She grinned up at me. No, I feel fabulous. Fiona gave me some kind of witch brew, and it worked. It helped me use my powers. I leaned down, sniffing her body. Fiona didn't smell human or fey, but like something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Something extraordinary and unexpected. James used the opportunity to lunge at her, but I jumped in front of Fiona. In one step, I stood before James, who extended his gloved fists against me. But as strong as he looked, the hunter was no match for an alpha wolf, especially an older, wounded hunter. There was no competition. I gripped his shoulder, dodging the blow intended for my face with ease, and punched him in the gut. As his face fell, I knocked James out, and he dropped to the ground, unconscious. Let's check on the others. I grabbed Fiona's hand, pulling her along. Look out. Someone yelled from behind. Lucas shifted and raced down the hallway, landing on a hunter, pointing a rifle at us. His sharp canine snapped the man's arm before my beta ripped his throat open. As soon as the hunter landed on the floor, Lucas changed back into human form. He ran toward us, unconcerned with his without clothes body. The hunters are now pretending to be captives. They are bombarding us when we open the cells. Lucas sounded out of breath. I wonder how they knew we'd end up here. Fiona asked. They probably realized we would come for Rianne, Kyra, and the members of our pack. I tapped my chin. Tell the wolves to guard all the creatures of Primordial. We gotta rescue as many as we can and take them to Tiona. Yes, Alpha. Lucas shifted back into wolf form before dashing off. We have to find Rianne and Kyra, Fiona said. I nodded and stripped out of my clothes. Shifting, Fiona knew my intentions and jumped on my back. Clinging to my furs, I rushed down the corridor. We crossed the compound and discovered the extent of the chaos. The hunters had arranged themselves in the middle of the enclosures, creating pandemonium. Perhaps they didn't expect us to act as a team and work together. The witches and vampires joined foreign forces and formed united fronts to battle their captors. I noticed that only a handful of people were trying to escape, and they were kids, old people, and the sick and wounded. But the rest of us remained to fight. As I turned a corner, I saw Fiona meeting with a group of witches. The red-haired led them along as they recited a spell that created a strange vibration in the air. A ball of purple energy formed between Fiona's hands, and she hurtled it toward a group of hunters, who wailed as some kind of booby trap swallowed them. I ran without stopping, with Fiona on my back, checking every cell until she shouted, "I see him." She didn't have to point it out. I smelled my brother's unique scent. I zoomed ahead and Fiona clung on as I smashed through the gate with my muzzle. We crashed into the cage and shards of glass covered everything. Fiona rushed to Rian and cupped her hands around his face. My brother was pale and unconscious. Thank goodness he's alive. Fiona glanced at me, but his pulse is faint and his lips are blue. Rian's not well and I must help him. She placed her hands on Rian's chest, and her palms blazed with golden light. I stood stupefied, as tiny flickers danced between her fingers. "Rowen," Fiona screamed, and my foe rose along my spine. I whipped around, anticipating danger, and collided with Cormac Quinn. Chapter 35, Drug War Rowen. I glanced in the back seat, staring at the spot Cat had occupied, and exhaled, finding it empty. "I owe you, Fiona. Where did you send her? Do you see the look on that evil woman's face? We don't have time for small talk." "Alpha Wolf," Fiona whispered through clenched teeth. "She's safe. I sent her back to Lucas." "Exit the vehicle." Queen Celestria's voice boomed, sounding like she was in the SUV with us. "Can she hear us?" Fiona asked, peering at me with widened eyes now. Fiona leaned up between the seats, keeping her speech low, but she can project her voice. "Listen, Cat is fine, and I bet thrilled to find herself with that hot wolf." "Lucius," I heard Rian's call from behind. "That's what you are worried about. Leave it to a woman to care more about. Stifle yourself. Wolf pup, we all best start worrying about ourselves. I'm powerful, but I can't fight this evil creature alone." Fiona leaned back and shot Rian with a venomous glare. "She's right. We can't put it off any longer." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Watching the Queen striding toward the vehicle. "Why are you here?" Exiting the SUV and keeping my gaze on Fiona, she, along with Rian and Fiona, met me in front of the SUV. Celestri appeared at us before studying her fingernails as if she were bored. As we neared, her gaze zeroed in on Fiona. We had a pact. "I'm ready to uphold my end of the bargain. Are you?" Her pale blonde brows raised, and she cocked her head to the side. "Tell me where Princess Saya Aquil is and I will inform you who, in my court, is helping your father with sex flex. You know who aided my father." Fiona made to move toward the Queen, but I grabbed her. Queen Celestria folded her arms, drumming her nails in irritation. "I know everything, secret or not, that happens within my court." I bit back a curse. "So you made a deal with Fiona to find your daughter in exchange for information you already had?" Celestria smiled. "That's correct. Wolf, why would I impart my knowledge without getting something in return?" She looked down her nose, sneering. "You may be a shapeshifter, but you do not understand how sacred a pact is between the Fae. Nothing comes without a price." Ryan stepped in front of Fiona and Fiona, shielding them, and stood beside me in solidarity. "I am more than a shapeshifter. I'm Alpha O'Connell, and this is my province. You have crossed my borders uninvited and..." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I want you to leave, and I am丨The, Queen of Thigh, who travels wherever she pleases. You are nothing more than a mortal beast. She held her head high, but I saw the challenge in her expression. You're just a bitter old fairy, I retorted, lifting my head and squaring my shoulders. But we are not here to exchange names and ranks. Rowen reached out, touching my shoulder. I knew it was a gentle reminder to control my temper. Though my anger was justified, it wasn't wise to antagonize this all-powerful foe. The queen scowled at us with hatred, and venom seemed to pour off her in waves. You have a young sister you should worry about, she announced before a coy grin lifted her lips. Just as I am worried about my young daughter. Princess I isn't a child, we answered, sounding far more calm and collected than me. She's still a child to me and my kind. The queen narrowed her eyes. That may be, Fiona spoke up, but she doesn't know you. You gave her to my wicked father. What kind of mother does that? The queen whipped her head toward Fiona, her displeasure clear. Her place is now with me. She will understand why I did what I had to do for the Fire Realm. Being a queen forced me to make sacrifices. But I don't intend to lose her because of those sacrifices. And if she doesn't want to be with you now or forgive you... Fiona lifted her shoulders. Are you going to tell me where my daughter is?丨asked. No, Fiona shook her head. We made a pledge. The queen said, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You made a pledge, but I never accepted. Fiona's pat. I am your queen, and it's now an order.丨glided toward us. I positioned myself in front of Fiona. You have no authority here. She glared at me with fury in her eyes. I am the Queen of Thigh. Yes, you are, but you hold no power here. Go back to your kingdom and rule over your subjects. Leave my territory now. Feeling my inner wolf raging inside. You are making a fatal mistake. Wolfma.丨face contorted in anger. Starting a war with me would be a horrible idea for your entire race. No one is declaring war, announced Rowen, shaking his head. We just can't give you what you are asking of us. That's a declaration of war. Foolish wolf. The queen shook with rage. If you're keeping my daughter's location a secret, you're my enemy. I will eliminate you, your pack, and all you hold dear. I'm sorry you feel that way. I crossed my arms over my chest, matching her heated stare. She nodded. You leave me no alternative. Alpha wolf. A strange roar erupted, causing us to look around while the queen remained unruffled as figures emerged like ghosts in the night. Each one appeared to be a creature from the fairy realm, yet it was hard to tell, since it seemed they were all dosed with sex flecks. Some dressed in torn, dirty rags, and others in elaborate battle gear. But all looked wild-eyed as they clambered through the snow on a rampage. Just what the feck are you doing? I asked the queen, bellowing with fury. This onslaught violates all treaties between the creatures of Primordial. Your race violated the treaties by kidnapping my daughter, yelled the queen, lifting her haughty chin. Now tell me where she is, or accept the repercussions. We did not kidnap Princess Ariel. Fiona stepped around me and I held my arm out, keeping her out of harm's way. Knowing where she isn't not telling me is the same thing. She held up a slim hand, and fairy servants surrounded her, carrying syringes filled with a deep blue liquid in large bottles of pills. It wouldn't take a genius to identify the source of the drug sex flex. Stop. Fiona pushed past me, throwing up her hands. You're gonna cause a bloody disaster. Queen丨stalked toward Fiona, and I watched the muscles clench in her jaw. Then tell me where my daughter is and I'll call off this impending disaster now. Fiona wailed, crossing her arms. Rowen, now. Rowen yelled from behind, and I knew what he meant. You're crossing the line.丨. I gritted my teeth and howled out to my pack through the mental bond that united us. This will ignite war. The Queen just smiled. If you so desire. Eltha O'Connell. No. Ryan yelled and charged at Queen. But it was too late. The servants of the fairy realm distributed the sex flicks to the drug-addled soldiers, who ingested and injected it. You could almost feel a regenerated sigh in the air as the addicted creatures succumbed to their high. For a second, it felt like time stood still until a collective roar lent the air. Get in the house now. Shoving Fiona toward the door. Where's Fiona? To my agent extraordinaire, my Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Grab the witch. I watched Rianne scoop up the tiny witch who put up a hell of a fight, and then pushed Fiona inside. See you in hell. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The Queen threw a saucy wink and blew me a kiss before disappearing, leaving behind the creatures whose shouts defied silence. Inside the house, Rianne rushed past us carrying a kicking and screaming Fiona. I gaped outside in fear, watching the devastation erupt like doomsday. Then an alarm sounded, ringing in my ears, and hundreds of wolves poured out of their homes, dashing around and preparing for battle. The frenzied wails of children and those too old or sick to shift erupted, and I knew it was time. Wolves, gather up. I busted through the door and shifted. My mind connected with all the wolves that made up the O'Connell pack. There were over 400 of us, and the sex flex induced fairy warriors appeared about half of our numbers. And still, I feared this battle. Enthusiasm in my head. I heard my packmates calling from all directions. I sensed their thoughts converging with mine. I watched them howl, pulling flesh apart while the opposition did the same. But their misery, their rage, their panic, and their deaths would become mine. My body crashed into one of the sex flex goblins. Its screech soared into the air like a war cry. The monster fell to the earth and its claws swiped at me. I sensed its fangs close to my hide and, in response, I sunk my canines into its jugular, and chemical, tasting, rotten blood filled my mouth. As I grappled with the goblin, I felt Fiona's fear throughout my body. Through Rianne's eyes, I watched her run, steadying herself at his side and grabbing Fiona's hand. They ripped our home apart, leaving broken windows, doors, and complete chaos. Ryan hoisted Fiona and Fiona onto his back and rushed out of the house, followed by at least 5 fairy goblins, who chased after him. I knew what Rianne was trying to do, and I dropped the goblin's limp body, leaving my pack to hunt the rest, and ran to catch up with him. Ryan charged out of the house with Fiona and Fiona clinging to his fur. I caught up to him right when one of the monsters lunged at them. Fiona's scream rose into the air, and I leapt over the creature, ripping its midsection apart as shrieks of anguish escaped the monster's mouth. Ryan rushed Fiona and Fiona into the SUV and left them beside it. I saw Fiona open the door, ready to get in, when I sensed something dark, causing my hackles to rise. A desperate howl from the pack made my first and on end as I noticed an additional threat. My eyes closed for a moment, and then I observed 6 black armored pickup trucks emerge amidst the pandemonium. The first stopped a few feet before reaching us, and a lone figure jumped out. "Did you miss me?" Cormac Quinn asked, holding a rifle on Fiona and Fiona. Rianne's outcry crashed around me as I watched Fiona hit the ground. I felt the pain burst inside me and knew the bullet had hit Fiona, but it hadn't killed her. As she screamed out in pain, Fiona kneeled in front of her, and I rushed to her aid while Rianne threw himself on Cormac. The old hunter chuckled and fired the gun at my brother, who evaded the shot and tackled Cormac to the ground. Then the hunters scrambled out of their trucks, and all around me was more chaos. I knew we didn't have the time or capability to deal with the new danger unleashed out of nowhere. We must run. I used my mental link to the pack and raced toward Cormac Quinn to stop him. "But this is our home, my lord," one wolf shouted, and I heard it through the air and through my mind. "I understand, but we can't defend it." Not with Cormac and his hunting buddies added to the mix. I wanted to scream the words into the night, but I wouldn't give Cormac the satisfaction. I refused to sacrifice my pack members to defend a bunch of houses. Get everyone to the underground tunnels. Vacate the territory. Those who can fight, please keep the goblins and hunters occupied while the children, sick and old, make a quick getaway. I knew many of the wolves wanted to refuse my command, but an order given by the Alpha was indisputable. Cormac Quinn sprinted toward me. What a delight it is to see you again. Mutt. He fired the gun at me again. I was quicker than him and evaded the bullet, but I knew it wouldn't last long. Fiona. I called her using my mind, hoping the connection might make it possible for us to communicate. I prayed she'd understand my thoughts. Put your ass in the car with Fiona and get the Feku to here now. Lass. Never. Relief washed over me, hearing her voice in my head. Our fated mate bond worked. I refused to leave you. Rowen. Stubborn lass. Chapter 36. Epilogue Rowen. As I woke up, I watched the snow falling outside through the open blinds, mesmerized by the massive flakes that continued to drift down. Day after day, the storm continued its rampage, refusing to show any signs of abating. With a gentle touch, Fiona's warm hand caressed my back, prompting me to roll over and meet her gaze. She gave me a sleepy smile, her eyes half closed and her lips curled upwards. "'Tis snowing." "Yes, it's coming down pretty hard." "Lass." I kissed her nose. "Are you hungry, Looney O'Connell?" The sound of those words mixed with the grin on her blushing face sent a surge of warmth through my chest. "I'm famished, Alpha O'Connell, but not for food." Fiona winked, wrapping her arms around my neck. I savored the feeling of her body against mine as my hands found their way to her firm, rounded buttocks. Her lips, delicate and pink, met mine in a kiss that exuded ardent enthusiasm, leaving me longing for more. The touch was electric, sending a shiver down my spine. Her faint scent of a delicate blend of jasmine and earth filled the air, intoxicating my senses. At that moment, time seemed to stand still as the world faded away, and all that existed was the warmth of her body against mine. It was a feeling I had never experienced before, a surreal combination of a dream and reality merging into one. Every inch of my being felt complete and content, as if I had found the missing piece of my soul in her embrace. Her chest brushed against mine and I grabbed her hips, flipping her over and settling myself above her. As I pushed Fiona into the sheets, she wrapped her legs around my hips, pressing her apex against me. I let out a low, guttural groan as she peppered kisses on my neck, the sensation sending shivers down my spine. With a swift motion, I pulled her hands above her head, her wrist stored against the headboard. My mouth trailed from her face down her chest, finding one of her nipples, the taste of her skin lingering on my tongue. As she threw her head back, a melodic moan slipped from her lips, filling the room with a symphony of bliss. Her urgency intensified as she thrust against me, her body craving more. In response, I delved my tongue into her mouth, the mingling taste of our desire igniting a fiery passion within me. The rhythm of our movements quickened, and the sound of our bodies colliding saturated my soul with passion. Fiona's teeth caught my lower lip, her vivid gaze locking onto mine, radiating a fierce, alluring demand. I knew what she craved, and I was more than eager to fulfill her needs. After her prolonged orgasm, I surrendered to the overwhelming ecstasy. I relished in the waves of euphoria, taking over as our gasps for air intertwined. As I collapsed beside Fiona and held her tight, I couldn't bring myself to let go, haunted by the fear of almost losing her. "Are you still hungry?" I wagged my brows, toying with her hair, and wiped the sweat from her brow before nuzzling my nose against hers. She made a purring sound and buried her face in my chest. "But need coffee." A deep, hearty chuckle bubbled up from within me. "Well, get dressed and let's go downstairs, lass." I hopped from the bed and smacked her curved backside, making her giggle. As we stepped into the dining room, holding hands. I couldn't help but notice the blush staining her cheeks, and a grin lingered on my face from our laugh-making. I made coffee, my brother said, spotting us. You are a saint, Fiona mumbled as she headed straight for the coffee pot. I watched as we strode toward Tiana and Kat, seated next to each other at the dining room table. I bet this awful blizzard is my mother's doing, Kat said, pursing her lips in a frown. Can she cause a storm like this? Brian asked, glancing at Tiana, who knew Queen Celestria better than any of us. The blizzard was wreaking havoc not only in Dublin, but also across the UK. The massive storm had left the streets deserted and devoid of life, with a heavy sense of uncertainty hanging in the air. Tiana nodded. Queen Celestria possesses a wide range of abilities. The intensity of her power increases when she's agitated, angry, or upset. Take Fiona, for example. Her powers derive from fire. Tiana stared at Fiona, drawing everyone's attention. The Princess of Shadows seemed to think about her following words. Taking a sip of coffee first. The Fae draw their powers from the elements light, darkness, shadows, the sun, noon, and so on. So do witches, replied Rianne with a grimace. My brother had never cared much for witches, their presence stirring up memories of our bitter, long-standing feud. Other than fairies, witches were among the things Rianne detested the most. In a peculiar turn of events, the ethereal presence of fairies and the mystical lore of witches emerged as our unexpected saviors. We stood in awe as Fiona, a hybrid, displayed her incredible power with an unmatched dominance that left astounded. Ancient legends credit fairies as the original owners of all magic, and the ones who granted mythical gifts to other races. Tiana's voice held a note of pride as she grinned at us. That's what the Fae think, I whispered, sitting down next to Rianne. He nodded and rolled his eyes. Tiana pretended not to hear me. Like the witches, we draw powers from nature. From there, they derive into multiple gifts that depend entirely on the person. However, like the three of us, Tiana gestured to herself, Kat and Fiona, our power is pure. I am shadows. Fiona is fire, and Kat is light. Fiona and Kat sat in silence, their eyes locked onto Tiana as her words filled the air. Her soft voice captivated them, drawing them closer with each word. The revelation of their hidden powers ignited a spark of wonder, leaving us eager to know more. Yet Tiana's soothing presence seized our racing thoughts, granting a moment of tranquility amidst the storm of curiosity. Magical powers can take years to develop and learn. The primary focus is to grasp that, like the spirit of a wolf, your abilities are brimming with life. They possess a semblance of awareness. I nodded, sipping my coffee. All members of the pack understood that personal and wolf identities were often distinct from one another. Werewolves were instinctual creatures who acted based on emotions. The clashes between people and their wolf counterparts were often due to their different ways of understanding the world. Upon the arrival of a fresh pack member, those oblivious to the legends and tales, the sheer shock overwhelmed them. It was infuriating to have a strong consciousness take over their own. Sounds, smells, and feelings intensified this experience, making it even more overwhelming. I wondered if perhaps Fiona and Kat felt like this regarding their powers. Similar to us, they would encounter the challenge of unraveling the dormant awareness that lived within them. I recalled when Fiona faced off with Celestria. Her skin flared into flames, her orange eyes and the sparks that drifted from her fingers. And when she placed her lighted hands on my brother's chest, bringing color back into his face, Fiona glanced at her cup and cleared her throat. I'm worried about my mother. I recognized the fear in her eyes, sensing it throughout my being. She fought against Queen Celestria, showing her unwavering devotion to our well-being. Tears welled in her eyes. Would the Queen kill her for helping us? Tiana replied, she might try, but you're forgetting your mother is a powerful fairy, the real Queen. All three of us come from a bloodline with a long-standing reputation for immense power within the Fae realm, so she's safe from Celestria, Fiona's eager expression squeezed my heart. I don't know. Diana shook her head. You've seen what she is capable of when challenged. Her expression, tinged with fear, reminded us of the confrontation between Celestria and Kat. Celestria is not one to forgive insolence. While I doubt she'll go as far as killing Merlinet, she'll definitely ensure she faces the repercussions for aiding our escape. A week ago, mutilated corpses filled this place, and injured individuals occupied every nook and cranny while others tried to provide aid. Many of them perished. The wounds and transformations were so severe for some that death would have been a merciful release. The battle erupted as a direct consequence of Celestria's seething fury toward our defiant and refusal to hand over Kat. The survivors wasted no time in leaving once news of the incident reached the ears of the leaders of the different races. Diana lowered the defenses of her home, feeling the weight of responsibility, and guided the wounded and rescued through the icy, snowy roads. The creatures of Primordial revealed themselves little by little, shedding tears of joy or sorrow. Regardless, they were grateful to know the hunters did not imprison their loved ones anymore. After what felt like an eternity, the world fell into a hushed stillness. Diala defended her home, even though the plants died and snow covered her enchanting cottage that used to have flowers and fruit trees. Diana's perpetual springtime haven was now bleak and compromised. She looked exhausted when she arrived back here. Dark circles showed under her eyes and her lips appeared dry. The rest of us didn't look any better, but with the growing worry about the present situation, we had no choice but to take drastic measures. With war declared, the tension in the air was palpable, our hearts pounding with anticipation, and our weapons at the ready. And thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.